Well, hello everybody. It's great to see you. I'm sure a few more people will join us. I think people run off between the shows to get snacks and things, and I'm just talking for a second to see if you all can hear me and make sure that everything is sounding right. Ah, you found something good in your storage units. Yeah, well, that's one of the rewards for having dealt with your storage unit, and we'll talk about that. Let me know if you can hear me, and it sounds like I'm getting the high sign from inside here that it sounds good on our end. So, Corinne, nice to see you. Sounds good on my end. Sounds great. Well, it's very nice to see you all. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all that good stuff. How are you all doing? Are you ready for the holiday season? Are you getting ready? I know that Beth is making cookies while she watches, and I'm sure that some of you other folks, I oftentimes am watching YouTube and doing things like wrapping and packing things, so that's definitely what we do. Critter Girl is here. That's great. Very nice to see you here, and I hope the drive-through ended up being delicious. Um, so I'm curious to know how many of you are giving something vintage or antique as a gift this year. And unless it's something that you're afraid they'll see on the screen, tell us what you are giving that is vintage or antique, because I'm always curious. A lot of people are afraid to give vintage and antiques at Christmas, but if you know people well and know what they collect, or just see something that says the right thing, sometimes it's the perfect thing to do. Let's see. Oh, you're trying to move during the holidays. Oh boy, that's a thing. Wow. Someone's planting a cradle to get ready. That is wonderful. Um, I always do. Oh, that's great. Um, Cattle is vintage. You're giving cattle for Christmas? Wow, that sounds like a big old thing. Oh, car ephemera. Oh, that's a great choice. Yes, because if I remember right, I think he's working on the family. Is it the Corvair? Um, your niece is getting a 1950s ukulele. Oh, that's so cool. Miss Oodalolly of Oodalolly Shop was telling us that she plays ukulele. Nothing antique this year, although I did get some modern art glass. Oh, that's very nice too. I think handmade things are another thing where, even if they're contemporary, they're unique and they are something that is, there has to be some thought that goes into that for people's tastes and things. Um, for me, the Corvair is the one. Yes, okay. For me, I did send a few things this year. Everybody who, I'll be honest, I had to make it easy. Everybody who didn't like antiques and vintage, well, you know what? They got fudge from the fudge store. And the people who liked antiques and vintage, well, they're easy because I can shop for them all year. So I sent the relatives in Delaware. I found a cafe creamer from the 1920s from the St. George's restaurant, and they are right literally down the road from where that place either is or was. It may still be in existence, actually. I'm giving my granddaughter a painting my grandmother painted in an antique frame. Oh, that's so nice. Oh, Willie Joe, your family said no gifts this year. It feels, and then you didn't say, so it feels great or it feels fill in blank. Oh, Susan, hello, good to see you. You're giving a vintage Star Trek character ornament. Oh, that's great. Um, yes, Willie Joe will have to know the rest of that, how it feels. It feels good. It feels weird. It feels strange. I I have to admit that with some of the folks in my circle, they are on the no gifts thing because of life changes or waiting for other things. Um, but no, I have a few who say no gifts. But if I see something that just speaks and says, "Oh no, this is something that's right for you," to that end, I was with a friend of mine, and we were in an antique mall, and we had just see his wife had just talked about her collection of Venetian glass vases, and she collects the triangular ones that are about this tall from the 60s, and she had a whole row of them, and we were going somewhere to get well, I'll tell you that in a minute, but we were in an antique mall, and I walk in the back room, and she was saying, "Oh, I only have 10 or 11. I've been collecting for 20 years. You just don't see this variety very often." And I just, one more and I'll have a dozen for the mantle. And I walked in and there was a purple and orange one, a really great color that she didn't have. And so I pointed to my friend and said, how would you like to make your wife really happy? So she's getting that for Christmas. Usually give some vintage, but mostly gifts for gardeners or food, so no dusting. Hello, Matthew Walker. Good to see you. I'm giving my partner vintage Macaskill colors he likes in black and white photography. Oh, that's so cool. Places that you went when you first got together, and you made a wreath out of vintage ornaments. That is really great. Oh, the year Santa forgot. Yeah, sometimes you have other things you have to focus on there. Oh, that's really neat, Matthew. I love that. It's so nice that it's so nice to find something that's really personal that way, and that you can have it connect over like that. Oodalali says, I'm not giving vintage this year. I'm making snack boxes. I have given vintage in the past. Yes, that's right, because I know you're doing, you've been doing some cooking on YouTube, as I understand. And of course, she is our apiarist, and they have wonderful honey, so that's a great base to work from. Mary Jo says, I'm really trying to carry on the Christmas traditions for the kids and grandparents. Aw, your first Christmas. Yes, it's different. I remember when my dad was gone the first year, and that was the year that he was gone at the beginning of October, and we just said no. And it took a little while, but it really is nice to keep the traditions going. What traditions do you folks hold near and dear in this season with that in mind? I think back to when I was growing up, and one of my favorite things to do is we had the little putz houses in the village. And I loved putting those out because I would rearrange them about every 2 or 3 days. The village would be different, and I don't know what made me do that. Oh, let's see here. Just curious to see. Wallace Macaskill took photos that were used on some of the money here in Canada. Oh, yes, that's right. I have seen some of that. That's so interesting. Oh, that's really cool. And yes, I understand. I ignored that too. I was told no gifts, and I sent fudge. And Corey Ramsey, Merry Christmas. Nice to have you here. We're talking a little bit about what's happening here. And this is, yes, Emily's gotten into the putz houses and has a village of them. Yeah, and we did too growing up. And I love that. That and the other thing was the Christmas crash. I was constantly playing with that and rearranging it, and sometimes the animals got part of the barn, and sometimes it was the wise men. And then I decided the wise men should be out on the edge because they got there late. I had lots of ideas as a child. So those were definitely a couple of things I remember. We would definitely watch The Grinch, and we would watch Peanuts. And those were both really interesting because they were about having a spirit of Christmas that wasn't so commercial. In fact, when the Peanuts special came out, the TV station or the network that had asked for Charles Schultz to do it was just horrified because the message was anti-commercial, and they thought, oh, this is going to be a huge flop, and it's going to piss off all our advertisers, and no one's going to want to advertise. And well, I guess we have to play it because we blocked out the time slot, but we're going to do it this year and never again. And then it turned out to be a giant hit, and the advertisers still got to advertise on it and do just fine. And everybody decided, oh, the Peanut special is pretty cool after all, which is why we watched it every year for years as a kid. I was not really into the stop motion ones, though, I have to admit. That always seemed a little herky-jerky to me. I think I was ready for CGI before it existed. Anyhow, oh, yes, that's neat that you have an Italian creche and all of that. Yeah, so I'm trying to think whatever. Oh, yeah, the other thing that I remember we would decorate cookies, and my dad would always take the snowmen and turn them upside down and make light bulbs, or a woman in bloomers bending over, or something inappropriate, and my mom would get mad, and then we would all copy it because we thought that was hilarious. And the other thing that I really enjoyed is Grandma would come over and she would stay through New Year's, and we would watch the Rose Bowl parade, and my parents were thrilled because it meant they could go out on New Year's Eve and not have to wake up with me to watch the Rose Bowl parade, so everybody was happy. Um, I like this. I was 3 and mom saw me playing with the Avengers. Suddenly I had the wise men say, "What the hell is going on here?" That's great. Ah, you play the Charlie Brown soundtrack for Christmas. Yeah, that was another thing too. They were very concerned because it was jazz music, and even though jazz was being supplanted by rock and roll, jazz was still, well, it was jazzy, and it might be too much for people. The broadcasters always seem to be behind what the market is ready for. So, um, and do the dances. Yes, absolutely. Yes, dancing is fun. Um, Cinnamon Red Hots. Yes, that was right. And you're from Germany. Yes, that's right. That is exact. That is so interesting to me. Yes. Uh, Germany has a lot to do with the fact that we celebrate Christmas in this country today, and also it has a lot to do with how we celebrate Christmas in this day. Um, Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You had your vacation. I'm so glad. That must have been amazing. And I bet you saw crazy, interesting, unusual things. And yes, if you don't really know that stuff, it's a little hard to buy there because you're going to the places where they're going to be asking the most because they figure that, we're Americans and we can afford it. And if you don't know for sure, well, then what do you do? Cinnamon buns for breakfast Christmas morning. Oh, that sounds nice. Oh, the pickle in the tree. Yes, that's right. I hadn't heard of that until a few years ago. Whoever finds it gets the extra gift. There's a tradition in Mexico where I think it's on Epiphany, if I'm not mistaken, because they also, like the Germans, Christmas Eve is when they start, and then that goes through Epiphany. And at one point, they bake a little ring, and it has a little figure. I want to say it's the Madonna that's in it, but it has a little figurine baked into it, and whoever gets the piece with the figurine has to buy the tamales for everybody, and that's the meal for the day. Um, yes. Yeah, maybe so. That may be true. They do actually push a little bit there. We open gifts at one at a time, youngest to oldest. That's an interesting idea, actually. And yeah, a lot of people, if you love traditions, the holiday is definitely a great time. And it's fun to start new ones. I'm always curious what people do. So thank you for sharing with me there. And that actually kind of brings us into one thing I wanted to talk about tonight for fun, just because it is the holiday, and that is, we tend to talk a lot. Let me go to this here. We tend to talk a lot about how, um, oh, the meaning of Christmas and the way that things have been lost. Actually, we can wait for a minute. I'll give you my full face. Um, that, oh, Christmas has become so commercial. Well, the thing is that Christmas has really evolved a lot over time, and especially in the United States. Back when the Puritans settled, they actually passed a law and forbade Christmas because they connected that with paganism. And so you were not allowed to have any celebration on Christmas at all. And in the South, because a lot of the people who moved there were from England and Ireland and all of that, they really didn't have a tradition of it either. So, surprisingly enough, the United States was not really much into celebrating Christmas. In fact, if you remember, George Washington crossed the Delaware to attack the Hessians in Trenton, New Jersey, which was the first victory that the Continental Army had in the Revolutionary War. And he crossed on Christmas Day and attacked them on December 26th. And why did he do that? Because he surmised that because they were German, they would celebrate on the 24th. And like Hedron said, usually the 25th and 26th were days to go around and see people. Well, they're mercenaries hired by the British to fight in this war. So they're just hanging out and having leftovers and having some drinks and not expecting an invasion, and that's the reason. So Christmas was not a thing in the United States for a really long time, actually. Um, and yes, eggnog. Yes, that's definitely one of my favorites. I have eggnog at least once every year, and yes, I have had my eggnog, and it actually was spiked, which was a big surprise. So one was enough. Um, The so anyway, the it wasn't really until, and now we'll go to the overlays. It was not until this happened. This is the wedding of Victoria and Albert as depicted in a famous painting of the era. And that happened in 1840. Well, Albert was from Germany. And so he brought all the German Christmas traditions to the royalty. And all of a sudden, they became very fashionable in England. And so the next thing we know, here is a drawing of them with their children at their Christmas tree. And all of a sudden, Christmas trees became the cool thing to have in high society in the English royalty and also in the society in the United States. And so, yes, and this is also true. I noticed the conversation here. Yeah. German Americans do the pickle thing, and it is not actually a German tradition. It's true. It started over here among the German community, and I'm not really sure why, but there's a story behind that. Oh, you were born on Christmas. How cool. The hospital gave a homemade stocking that says, Merry Christmas for Mom and Dad. Big enough for an infant inside. Oh, that's so fun. Oh, cool. And you know this history. Oh, that's great. So anyhow, yes, Queen Victoria made the Christmas tree something that people would do. And then there came Dickens. And Dickens made Christmas go from something that was a celebration mainly in the halls of royalty to something that became more about doing something kind for your fellow human being, because he saw the plight of the street urchins and children nearly starving to death in the streets of London at a time when the middle class was starting to really expand. And that's why he wrote A Christmas Carol. It was supposed to be informative to people, and it really was. And it was so popular, not just as a book, but soon made into plays. And it was something that really got into the zeitgeist. And so shortly after that, Boxing Day becomes a big tradition where the Victorians would box up if they got gifts or lots of extra food or something. They would box up their leftovers and their old stuff, and they would take it to poorer people in their neighborhood or in adjoining neighborhoods and give it to them. And that's when philanthropy at Christmas started to be more of a thing. Yes, Christmas about the decorations. Yes, exactly. Well, and that gets us into, when did modern Christmas, the way we think of it, start? And to me, that was about 100 years ago. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about what Christmas was like a century ago, because to me, the 1920s really are the beginning of what we associate with modern Christmas. And part of the reason for that is that World War I was so traumatic, and then they had the Spanish influenza. And between the two, there was just death and destruction and mayhem. And there was this feeling that we need to start over, and we need to try to do better, and we need to do better things for and give our children a nicer and softer and easier world. And right in concert with that was the rebuilding of various economies and the rise of the middle class in the United States, as well as the idea, again from Dickens, that Christmas time was a time of renewal and hope. Oh, soulmate, it's great to have you here. I'm so glad you're with us for the chat. We're talking about Christmas traditions. If you have some different Christmas traditions in New Zealand that we don't know about, it would be very interesting. Put them in the comments. I'd love to see that. We've been all talking about our Christmas traditions, and I'm just starting on what Christmas was like a century ago. And this magazine, Etude Music Magazine, which was published until the 50s, they were a great example of how Christmas marketing started to change to tell us how to celebrate. So, for example, in here they had an article that said, this is the December 1924 edition. Christmas is the time of giving. To give is to bless oneself with true happiness. All the Christmas gifts of the whole world do not equal in value the Christmas spirit. It's one of the great treasures of modern life, and by no means confined to those who are professing Christians. And that was something that was a new idea too, was that it wasn't just for people who went to mass and celebrated Christmas for reasons of religious purposes, but that it was for everybody. And then they said, its economic, sociological, and spiritual importance towers to the cloud. So it's interesting they threw economic in there, because that was a new idea. It had not been, there wasn't Black Friday, there wasn't all the emphasis on the economy then. And it says, make this Christmas spirit vocal with the most beautiful, most sincere festival of music of the year. Part of the reason was that instruments and merrymaking with instruments were a big thing at Christmas. And Etude Magazine's advertisers were people who made musical instruments. Let's see. Yes, that's right. Christmas is high summer where you are. Oh, that sounds so wonderful. So beach, barbecue, and sunscreen. Oh, that sounds fantastic. I love that idea. So why was that? Well, partly because things really changed in the 1920s. Up until the 1920s, Christmas was mainly about having parties, going to dances, maybe going to see a Christmas pageant or a Dickens play, and caroling and drinking and eating and going around in large groups of people to neighborhoods and singing songs and sharing food and drink and those kinds of things. And that was all really fun, but then the radio came along, and the radio changed everything, because suddenly people were staying at home with their family listening to the radio instead of getting together in large groups and going around and doing what had been traditional Christmas things before. And because of that, radios were one of the big gift ideas for 1924. Here is an ad for the Atwater Kent. Make it a 365-day Christmas, so you're supposed to buy this thing for your family for Christmas, and then you get to listen to it all the year round. And I would love a trip to Australia and New Zealand. There's so many wonderful things there, and obviously wonderful people, one of whom is with us, and we have others who join us in the chat from time to time, but also some really cool things were made in Australia and New Zealand that we don't see too often here. So yes, sometime there will be a time for that. Anyhow, so the 1920s are when you start to see vintage storefronts that are really pushing the idea of Christmas is a time to do nice things for your children. Again, we're coming out of World War I, we're coming out of the Spanish flu. The fact that children have survived to 1924 and there's a chance to renew the world makes children suddenly a lot more special, and they begin to be treated a little bit differently. And the idea is, oh, we're going to give them some nice gifts. So you see this place that is actually a pharmacy and soda fountain on the right with dolls for sale in their window. All those composition dolls, $2.98. Those are all probably worth $100 or more now. And then the other side is the Sport Mart, full of things for boys, bicycles and trains and all that kind of thing. And this is the beginning of the idea. And yes, these are big gifts, because the 1920s is when a lot of these consumer products have come along for the first time. And so not only is it that, but it's funny, I remember by the 1980s or 90s, giving things like this was considered a joke. I remember Roseanne Barr, when she was still a stand-up comedian, saying something about, oh yeah, we're at Christmas and I'm admiring my new dustbuster. But in the 1920s, a lot of people had just gotten electricity. So lamps and percolators and irons and all these things that are labor-saving devices were very welcome gifts at that time. So it started to become fashionable not just to buy gifts for your children, but to also buy gifts for each other if you had the income to do that sort of thing. And so this is interesting. And yes, I think that in our modern era, we're starting to move away from what I consider the modern Christmas era. And now we're starting to value time away from devices and time away from electronics. But 100 years ago, we were valuing the fact that we had access to these wonderful things that we hadn't had before. Also, it was a time most people, if they didn't have a lot of money, you made clothes, and a lot of times those were the gifts. But if you had money, Well, you could buy the latest flapper styles for yourself, for your parties and your dances, and you could also buy a nice little boodle bag, as they call the little cosmetic thing hanging from the purse that you see in this ad, or a nice little billfold or something like that, and give it to a friend. Or perhaps a gentleman would give it to his girlfriend or his wife, and that was a new idea. Uh, Things to buy and give for Christmas. So people had to be told to do this sort of thing. Even to the point where car dealers started promoting, and yes, we see that on television now. But and that gets to something I started to say. So my friend and I, when we found the purple vase, it was because we were on the way to pick up my Christmas present, which is a new used van, because poor old Leroy has 236,000 miles. So I found and starting to get a little tired. So Leroy is going to be semi-retired, and I found a Leroy replacement that is just like Leroy but only has 20,000 miles. So that's my Christmas present this year, was a car. This is the Oldsmobile dealership in the early 1920s. And yes, sometimes practical things, in my case a car, in your case an appliance, is a thing. Here's another thing. Yes, I asked for a new toilet for renovations. I have done that too. You know, when I look at it, it's like I want things I really need, and you can just stick a bow on that toilet and that's fine. I would have asked for one too, Mary Jo. So anyhow, I think this is fun because they have built, if you look at that closely, that's a backdrop, and they have made it look like the car is driving through the chimney and is part of the thing. Um, Another thing that was a new concept was the arrival of Santa. They were just starting to really solidify what Santa looked like. Thomas Nast drew a very famous depiction in the 1840s of him being round and having long white hair and a beard, and that became the prevailing idea. Up until the teens, it wasn't even decided if he was skinny, if he was fat, was he wearing a red coat. You can tell this guy is sort of medium sized, but he is coming out in a really cool pedal car that would be worth as much as the van I just bought if it was still in existence today. Sock and jocks, I hate shopping for clothes. I love that, actually. Yes, I got to that point too. In a certain point of life, I was like, you know what? Buy me the things I don't like buying myself, and then I'll take my return money, and on the 26th I will go out and buy the antiques and vintage that I really want, because then you don't have to worry and I get the things I need without having to spend my money. So yes, poor Leroy. I know Leroy is wonderful and still running, and will either be a nice spare vehicle or will be donated to charity to benefit somebody else. I haven't decided yet. I love Leroy, but when I found out that putting a new engine in was between $9,000 and $14,000, and I could go buy a nice used version of Leroy with a tenth of the miles for the same price, well, it kind of was a decision I had to make. Oh, Carol Sue, you're here. Hello there. Yes, socks and underwear, absolutely. That was definitely a thing, and that was definitely a thing too. We're talking about more affluent families in the 20s, but a lot of people, socks and underwear and basics, that is what you got for Christmas. Luxuries like a year of cable TV. Well, that's true, because, hey, I mean, as a college student, you know, you don't have money for those extra things, but you'll use them. So I get that, absolutely. Another thing that was a new idea was Christmas trees really became widespread. But Christmas trees were a little different than we imagine them now. They tended to be short and bushy compared to what we use now. Ornaments had mainly been handmade, and up until the 20s, people used lit candles on trees. And the fire marshals hated that because they were always having houses burned down. So when these came out, they were really promoted by the local fire marshals. General Electric came out with the cone-shaped Christmas lights in the early 1920s. I think it was 1921, and they became a huge hit because you could use them indoors and outdoors, and you could put them on the tree, and it was not likely to burn the tree down. So that was a pretty good hit. Also, we see the beginning of German-made glass ornaments taking over the market, where before that, ornaments were primarily handmade. And there's the bird. My mother always liked that. Here's a bunch of German glass ornaments. These are originals from the era. There were a lot of reproductions done by Old World Christmas in the 1990s. Let's see here. What am I naming the new van? It's I think I might have a little contest and let you folks name the new van. I haven't decided yet. I'm thinking I might lean towards that. Yes, Union Gospel Mission is definitely a possibility. There's a couple of other places as well. And yeah, I was disappointed because honestly, I'm one of those fix and keeps, and Leroy and I have a lot of history together, but it was just too expensive to make it work. Nowadays, yes, very interesting that you got to see the Christmas traditions around the world. I found that fascinating when we talked about that last year. And also trips and vacations and different experiences like that are now what people are looking for at the holidays. But that's because we are in a time of luxury and a lot of people already have a lot of stuff. And yes, you had those. Yes, absolutely. A lot of American homes got these too. They're obviously very collectible, of course. Um, and yes, I agree. I always like putting the things away afterwards. Makes me feel, aw, that's really nice. Oh, I'm so glad. I approve of that gift. Yes, a mushroom head Santa. I know that seems very strange. I think it's supposed to be a bell, actually. Um, yeah, there we go. Oh, you're going on a cruise to Belize. Very fun. Oh, that sounds nice. So, yes, modern Christmas is starting to change, but 100 years ago, we began the things that we're used to. Another thing, if you didn't have a real tree, some of the first fake trees that were made in the 1920s in Germany were feather trees. These are all made of goose feathers. They are very collectible now. If you find them, they usually sell. This one's probably a 2 or 3 footer. They usually sell for about $100 a foot. They're very, very interesting to people now. Christmas cards. We are in an era where we're starting to not send Christmas cards, but Christmas cards were a definite new thing in the 1920s. And here's Santa Claus again. Santa is still skinny. It wasn't until 1931 when Coke started promoting heavy Santa that we're used to seeing now. Here's another one. This one may be a fantasy item, I'm not sure, but I love that it shows the flapper getting into the car around Christmas time. And I think that's just great. There was actually a car called the Jordan made in the 1920s. It was the first car to be marketed and targeted at women specifically, and that was a pretty new idea. The other thing that was really different, oh, very good. You sent all your postcards yesterday. I sent some last week, and then I have a whole bunch of people I need to work on that. I still like sending the cards, especially if I can find vintage ones. I just think it's fun. This is, oh yes, okay, Christmas dinner. So Christmas dinner in the 1920s was sort of like we imagine now, but the food of choice was different. It wasn't until the late 20s that other foods like ham started to promote themselves because they realized that nobody's eating ham at Christmas, because the tradition was if you had money, you bought turkey. Turkey was actually kind of expensive, and you bought it at Thanksgiving and you bought it again at Christmas. And if you couldn't afford turkey or you couldn't hunt one, then you got goose or pheasant or chicken. It was almost always a bird dish, and almost always accompanied by Jell-O, which was the new wonder product of the 1920s. And that's when you start to get some of those really disgusting Jell-O recipes where there's macaroni or various salads made of Jell-O that I remember my grandmother would bring and everybody would look at and politely take a bite at Christmas. And we all thought that was very old-fashioned, which by then it was. Also, the idea of chocolate being available was a pretty new idea in the 1920s. And all of a sudden, chocolatiers like these ladies that they're showing working here were working round the clock to fill the demand because people were starting to give chocolate as gifts at Christmas and shortly after that at Valentine's Day. But that wasn't something that really had been done before. I noticed a few of you talking about stockings. Stockings were generally filled with oranges, nuts, and those sorts of food. Oranges and tropical fruits were considered exotic. They were hard to get and expensive back then. So that was considered a treat. I remember as a kid, I would hear, oh, we got oranges in our stocking. I think, oh, you were so deprived. But apparently at that point, no, that was actually a big deal. If you were lucky, you might get penny toys. And in this Toy Town grocery store, you see some of the pieces of this are newer than the 1920s, but down on the bottom you see a couple of little vehicles made of tin. Those are penny toys from Germany. Those would sometimes end up in stockings. Those are pretty collectible today too. Larry Hunter is here. Hello there. Yes, lime jello, pineapple, and cream cheese. I remember that one. I didn't mind that one. We were always happy when we liked when Grandma brought that. The carrots, yeah, that really depend. That depended, definitely. Oh, and here's someone where you eat turkey on some day other than holidays. Yes, I like turkey. It's good all the time. Carol Sue makes her own greeting cards. Yes, I've a few folks actually in this community do, which I think is a great idea. Yes, you mentioned the wool socks in as stocking stuffers. Exactly. Stockings actually go way back to St. Nicholas because supposedly in the 400 AD time, he dropped coins down a chimney for three sisters who were too poor to afford dowries, and they had hung their stockings up by the chimney to dry out, and the gold coins magically just happened to fall into the stockings rather than into the fireplace, which I'm not sure how that happened. St. Nicholas was apparently quite magical, but that's where the stockings came from. Santa adds a new pin to our stockings every year. Yeah, now we use stockings for all sorts of stuff. Gift cards come in stockings. I've seen people give rings in the stockings. I mean, now the stocking is a big deal. But back 100 years ago, well, that was sort of the beginning of commercially made stockings, kind of like Critter Girl was talking about. Critter Girl is younger than that, but about how she was sent home with the stocking because she was a Christmas baby. So anyway, Christmas has evolved a lot over time, but I just thought it would be fun in keeping with the season to show a little bit about how things were a century ago and how in many ways very similar to the way that we celebrate Christmas now. So I always ask for topics and suggestions, and one thing that somebody wanted to know about was a little bit more, well, the question was posed to me, perfumes and fragrances, when you're buying as a reseller, what do you look for in them? So I'm going to start actually asking you folks, what do you look for in fragrances? Do you wear fragrances? Are there particular brands that you miss that aren't around anymore? Are there particular things that would cause you to buy one over another? Is it the packaging? Is it the bottles? And I'll tell you a little bit about what I look for as a reseller in them, but I'm curious first of all to know what you like in terms of fragrances. Personally, I like sort of musky fragrances for myself, or spicy things. One of my favorite, I was given a small bottle when I was a kid, and I wish I could find some of this on the market. It was called, this is the 70s, it was called Male Chauvinist Pig. And it was a little tiny bottle with a pig on it, and it called itself the outrageously superior cologne for men. And that was the idea. It was kind of a joke, but it had a really wonderful smell that I really liked. Subtle smells that ask others to ask what I'm wearing. Yeah, subtle is good, in my opinion. I don't really use a lot of fragrance these days, much at all. And subtle is good. Gray flannel, yes, I really liked gray flannel, and it has become hard to find. I even got their gift set when I first went to college for Christmas with a muffler and gloves and a bottle of gray flannel in it. I really liked that. Musky, woodsy smells. You wear Riddle. Oh, very interesting. No added smells for me. Yeah, I'm mostly not anymore either because Zeno is very he can't be around a lot of fragrances. It messes with his breathing, so we have to be careful. Yes, when I was pregnant, I threw up on the bottle of on the perfume opium. Pregnancy and experiences like that can turn you off to something for the rest of your life. I understand. Patchouli, very interesting. Yes, I definitely remember liking patchouli when I was young. It was something that we associated with the hippies, of course. Um, yes, if you ever find male chauvinist pig, I would be in the market. Oh, very cool, Harry Potter. Natural oil. See, you're an RN. Yeah, that's exactly the thing. You have to be very careful these days because not everybody can handle, especially alcohol-based fragrances. Dirt Road Memories is here. Hi, it's great to see you. I don't personally like a lot of fragrances, but if I was looking to resell, I would base on ones that were popular known names or a pretty package or bottle. Yes, that is very good. And that gets us into what I was going to talk about, because that was the question, is what do you look for? So let's take a look at a few. So one thing I look for is packaging. There are many things that are collectible in fragrances because of the packaging. This is a rather nice evening in Paris, a very large bottle with the decorative box, and this one sold recently on eBay for $200. Now, evening in Paris is kind of a joke in my family because my mother and her sisters in the 1930s and 40s, because of the pretty bottles, they bought my grandmother evening in Paris every birthday and every Christmas. And when she died in 1972, they found all of it in a dresser. And they said, oh, I can't believe she kept all of this, and it seems like she never wore it. And my grandfather said, well, honestly, she didn't have the heart to tell you that the bottles were very pretty, but she didn't like the way it smelled. And one of the things about some colognes, it's the same concept as Jim Beam bottles. Why did Jim Beam make a bunch of bottles to put their whiskey in? Because it's kind of wasn't very good whiskey, and the bottles were the thing that helped them sell the product. And Evening in Paris was sort of the same way. Now, another line that was very popular, Sophisticat perfume, and this was Max Factor. Now, they had some very nice fragrances like Primitif and things that were very popular in their time, some of which are no longer made. But again, cute packaging sells to collectors now, so I definitely look for cute packaging. And yes, it still isn't good whiskey. I agree with you. Now, if you notice here, this one has a pearl necklace. The other one has a heart locket. They started this in 1954 and did it through the 1970s. And the first generation have the heart locket, and the second generation are the ones that have the pearl necklace. So there's one of each there. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, love the cat. And so that is definitely something to look for as a reseller. Here's another example of packaging. Obviously, this is a very good name because this is Van Cleef and Arpels. But the reason that this bottle, this purse perfume, just sold for $3,600 on eBay is because it is gold with a ruby and a diamond. So one of the things to look for, you never know. Sometimes somebody gets something as a gift that is maybe, how do I describe this? So maybe it's a little above their pay grade. Like they had a wealthy boss who gave this to them and they didn't really know what to do with it, or they didn't wear this fragrance, or they were afraid to wear it because they knew it was expensive. So there you are in an otherwise middle-class estate where you're looking at run-of-the-mill bottles of Charlie and Jean Dete, and all of a sudden there's something like this there. So that's why perfume and fragrances are definitely worth looking for at estate sales and garage sales and things. Because yes, extravagant, exactly. And extravagant sells. So that is absolutely right. Let's see here. Whoops. Don't want to. Here we go. Okay. Another example is this one. Now, the clear Prince Machiavelli crown bottle, clear with fragrance in it or not, they sell for $10, $15, $20. This one is turquoise. The turquoise is the hardest color to find. This just sold on eBay for over $400. And so look for style, look for color, look for things that maybe you haven't noticed before if you tend to look at this stuff. Here's another one where the packaging is really what makes it interesting. This one is Schuko Toys from Germany, and the Schuko bear actually had a perfume bottle hidden in it. And that is a surprise when you get into this. So this little bear is worth about $600. They also did dogs and things like that. You might find this in the middle of a toy pile somewhere and not even think to look for a perfume bottle in it. So, Male Chauvinist Pig was by Avon. Well, that makes sense because my grandmother had a friend who was an Avon rep, so I'll bet it came from them. Windsong, yes, my mother really liked Windsong. That's definitely a thing. And yes, Schuko, yeah, I love Schuko. They made great stuff, actually. And this was one of their surprise things that actually is across into this category. Another thing to look for, of course, is look at who made the bottle. If it's Lalique, it's probably good. This is an anniversary edition of L'Art du Temps. Now, that was Nina Ricci was the one who made the cologne, or the fragrance, but the bottle was made by Lalique. Now, later versions, they changed from a Lalique bottle to a glass bottle with plastic birds on the top that looks the same from a distance until you get up close for it. Those are worth very little. But the Lalique ones are the ones that are worth something, any version of them. Lalique also produced for a company called Worth. This particular bottle from 1944 was never opened. That is definitely something to look for. If it's sealed and never opened, that is important to people who are buying for the fragrance. This is also a very pretty art glass bottle with a lot of rigory, made in, I believe, the last year before René Lalique died. And because of that, this particular bottle is worth about $700 and recently sold for that price. Now, Lalique also had some fragrances made under the Lalique name. And I have to say, we had a giant perfume sale in Seattle, an estate sale where the woman had gone to Nordstrom's every week for 3 years, which meant 150 visits, and she bought 2 to 3 bottles of fragrance every time, and we had an entire room full of it. And there were several Lalique fragrances in there. And the appeal seemed to be more the bottles than the actual contents. But this is Chesgerade. I believe I'm saying that correctly or not mangling it too badly. But this is by Lalique, and this particular one sold for $800 recently. Look for things that are obvious names, but also that are sealed or have never been used, because the fragrance often is what is the selling point. And yes, you can sell fragrances on eBay in the bottles. You have to be careful about the shipping, but if you are careful about it and make sure it's wrapped very well so that it won't leak and it won't explode and get all over everything, then yes, you can ship these things. And Tiffany obviously is a name because it's Tiffany, but these particular ones, these 2 bottles together are about $175 each, new in the box. Oh, here's an interesting thing. You sold a tiny Hello Kitty perfume for, I think, $68. And we'll talk about miniatures in a minute, because miniatures are another good thing to look for. Absolutely. And you have a miniature saddle bard as well. White shoulders. That's great. Finding an old lady wearing white shoulders and smoking a cigarette. Now follow them to the end of the world. I love it. Yes, white shoulders was definitely very popular. A lot of the Lanvin lines had nice cameo glass bottles, and so they're popular too. Let's see. Here's another one that's a very good brand that you'll see this around, but this is Shalimar by Guerlain in Paris, and Shalimar was very popular. This is another one where the bottles used to be glass. This one's an original from 1969, never opened, and they then and this sold for $1,000 because it's new in the box, unsealed. On the other hand, Oh no, I'm sorry. There's another Guerlain I'll show you. That's the one that sold for 1,000. I think this one sold for 300. On the other hand, they then changed to plastic tops, and those don't sell for much of anything. Now, it's not always about the packaging. It can also be about the name. Chanel number 5. Chanel is very famous, of course. This is just partly used. This one is from 1946, and even though it's partly used, this sold for $500 because the fragrance was good. And that's the other thing. Now, you may need to take it outside, especially when we had the big sale with all the fragrances. We made people take them out the door because they would have killed us if they had tested everything inside. But we let them walk out onto a porch, smell it to make sure it was good. Because if you're selling it for the contents, that is absolutely critical. If it doesn't smell good, people are not going to buy it, or they're going to return it if they bought it for the contents. I have my bookkeeper loves Paloma Picasso. It's been discontinued. She said, anytime you find any and it smells good, please buy it for me. It's my fragrance. I can't get it new anymore. Yeah, here you go. Just with a sample, a tiny sample, the postcard sold for $14. That's absolutely right. Let's see here. Okay, here's this Guerlain bottle. So Guerlain's obviously a good, this is the one that sold for $1,000 because it was sealed, and it's also a pretty bottle. So if the bottle seems interesting and elegant and not plain, that's a good place to start. Certain names are obviously something to look for. But if you're at a sale, you know, take your phone, hopefully you have access, look up anything. This is Shiseido. I wouldn't think much of it because I know it's a good brand, but fragrances can be expensive. And this particular piece, which I think is about 15 or 20 years old, this just sold for $400 online. So the best thing I can recommend is when you're in a place and you see this sort of thing, just be prepared to look things up. I had never heard of this company before. I bought a bottle recently. It turned out to be worth $100. It's Penhaligon's. It is an English company that's very popular. This is a miniature. Just this miniature sold for, I think, around $75. Miniatures are fun. This is a Salvador Dali perfume. It's very, very tiny. The top is plastic, but it's supposed to be the nose, and there's the lips. I sell these in Florida all the time because the Dali Museum is there. And it's not a high-end fragrance. It's not that people are buying it for that reason. They're buying it because it's a cool bottle. And that's reason enough, actually. So those are some of the things. So basically what I look for, I made a little checklist here. Hermes. I had a tiny little sample of Hermes. It was half gone. I sold it for $20 because they're like, oh, when am I going to be able to afford Hermes? And that's a great price. So look for name brands you know. Check the ones you don't, just to be sure. If it's got some of the content left, smell it to make sure it smells good. If it's empty, then you're just basically buying for how cute the bottle is. And so base it on that. Who made the bottle? And also, sealed is better. Can you ship the thing if you're selling online? If it's empty, you know, plastic over glass or glass over plastic. If the label is good, if it's attractive, that all helps. And basically, if you just go from there, you'll have fun with it. It's a category I never really imagined buying, but I ended up with having that big estate sale. I saw there was a market. And since then, I have some collectors who want me to bring fragrances anytime I see them. And so I bring them to shows, and, you know, they do pretty well. So that is the, oh, interesting. You worked for a perfumery. Oh, I'll bet that was interesting. And I'll bet you have some pretty good stuff because of that. Now that's interesting. Yes. And a lot of people do. Yeah. They just keep the stuff that they're, in there. And, you know, as a collector, you know, if you like fragrances, that's great. I have a couple of collectors who just love them, and it's their thing. And for you, like you said, you have to be careful. Wearing essential oils and things is the best you can do because you're around a lot of patients, so it might not be your thing. But I know that we had somebody who wanted to know how we look for them, and that's what we do. So let's see. I've got one more topic that was suggested by two different people, and they kind of get around to the same thing. So, um, and it's sort of, foibles and follies and things that we run into. And one asked about tagging, and one asked about storage and death piles and co-ops. So, um, I've had a few of you mention issues that you're facing both online and in real world selling. Um, so I'll touch on a few of those, and I think the first one is tagging and description. Someone specifically asked about. Um, oh, and this is one thing real quickly on the perfumes. Your favorite scent is rose, but cannot afford, and that's the reason that a lot of people look for these in estates, is because you might be able to buy something that you would never be able to afford somewhere else. So, okay, let's talk about tagging and descriptions a little bit, because whether you're selling online or in a real world mall, it is, or a shows or whatever, it is so important that the tags have information that's useful to you and also helps sell the item. Because a lot of times you may not be there, or even if you're standing right there, some people don't want to be confronted with a salesperson. They want to look at something, get an idea about it, and then express interest. And so your tags are the thing that interpret things for the collector. What do you folks who are collectors, let's ask you, and all of us are, so all of you can participate with this. What information is important to you when you're trying to make a purchase decision? What do you want to see on a tag? What's helpful to you? I'd really like to know. I'd really like to know what information you'd like to see or that you're not seeing when you're out there looking at stuff, or if you're shopping online. I am so frustrated a lot of times because I go to the description of something and the description is blank, or the description is the size of the piece and that's it. It doesn't say anything about, oh, well, somewhere there's a line that says condition, somewhere there's a line. It seems to me like we make things hard on our collectors sometimes. They have to go fishing for information that, to me, I like to see and like to put right in the description. And it's also what helps sell the item. Um, so if, okay, there we go. Beth says she likes as much as possible on the tag. And I have to say that's my bias as well. Um, the kind of information I think needs to be on a tag, honestly, um, enough information to guide research. Yes, exactly. Something that gives me an idea. I like to see something that says the title of what it is. If it's scarce, maybe a reason like scarce, 1 year only. If something was made for a very limited amount of time, or artist made, it's the only one that was made. That sort of thing is helpful. This is great, Mary Jo. Yes. Maker, pattern, year of production, where made, unique characteristics. Yes. And yes, it should be legible. That is a problem sometimes we get in a hurry. Hey, Emily, nice to have you here. We've been talking about all sorts of stuff, and we're talking right now, and your opinion is welcome too. What information do you like to see in an online description or on a tag if you are looking at a piece in the real world? What helps you as a collector make a decision to buy something? My biggest issue is, can I trust the vendor first? And that's another reason I definitely look at tags. I want to see if they know a little bit about what they're talking about with the pieces, because sometimes that tells me as a reseller, oh, they don't know what they're looking at, so maybe I'll find a bargain, but buyer beware. On the other hand, if I see something and there's a little bit of damage and it says as is on the tag, I think, okay, they're checking their stuff over and they're being honest and hopefully pricing it accordingly. And that tells me something about the dealer too, because you can't be there all the time unless you have your own store and you control everything. You just can't be there all the time to control the perception of these things. Mall I was in kept the price tag, so I made perforator tags so a buyer could keep the piece with background info. That is actually a really, Really good idea. And yes, Hedron, I'll turn the volume up. I think I might be getting hoarse. Okay. Hopefully that'll be a little better volume for you. Um, yes, that happens a lot. And that was actually part of what the person who asked about tagging, and we'll get to that in a minute, was what do I do if I can't get the tag back? So what I like, number one, online, I need to know the size of something. And here's an example of where I got into trouble, because I bought a very nice pottery craft vase. Now tell me from this picture, how big is this vase? Can you tell? I can't tell. That doily might be a square foot, or it might be 6 inches. That vase could be 12 inches tall or 4 inches tall. So I bought a piece of I bought a piece that was a Pottery Craft Botanica piece. And I was very excited. I did not know at the time, because I hadn't written the book yet, and it was partly for my research. I did not realize that the piece I bought was 4 inches tall. I thought they only made this size. So I paid this size price and got something this size in the mail. I was glad to have it, because then I learned that they made different sizes, but I would have been very disappointed if I was a collector and this shrunken miniature came and I was expecting to have a big vase. So, and yes, this is the thing. I would guess a foot too, but no real indicator exactly. So this is the problem. Another thing, every flaw needs to be emphasized. Now, I have a friend helping me with my listings because I've been traveling over these months. And so an example here, and someone in our midst actually is the owner of this piece now, which makes me happy because it was a really cool piece, and it was S&H green stamps. And hopefully, if you were unhappy with your purchase, you'll let us know. But my friend tried to, you notice that the light from the camera really emphasized the crinkles and unevenness and everything in this piece. And so my friend, when we were doing the description, he described it really critically. It's got some folds, it's got some riffling, it's got a crease in the upper corner there. And I thought that it was almost too much, but it meant the person who bought it knew what they were getting and they could make an informed decision. And that is the important part. Using a common item like a dime or a quarter can be helpful for scale. That's true. Also, I didn't used to think I liked the tape measure thing in the thing. Now I do think I like that in one picture. I think it's helpful. I like this idea that you got paper with perforations. I bought a perforation machine that could make extra tags that way. What tears my night is when they have things in cabinets where you can't see the tag. Yes, and you know, that is an easy thing to fix. I'm in a mall here, and they said, you know, sometimes when we put the item back in the case, the tag gets flipped over. Would you please at least just write the price on the back of the tag so that at least they can see how much it is and then decide if they want us to take it out and see the rest of the information. And I thought, that's not that hard. I can do that. And yes, something where you can actually get a sense of it. Yes, the problem with international sales, absolutely, because what size is a coin? Well, it depends where you are. It is nice when the actual vendor is there, but you just can't count on that to always happen. So, so basically, I just figure that what is needed to know, don't assume knowledge. A detailed tag helps the customer make a decision. It helps you know what types of things are selling. I always put an inventory code on mine because I want to know if they call on the phone and they say it's inventory, blah, blah, blah. I know from my inventory code how long it's been in the store, or at least how long I've had the piece, and what I paid for it. So if somebody calls me and says, oh, it's this amount, I can say, you know, you've got 100 on it, they're offering $80. Well, I know if I just put it in last week, I'm probably not taking an $80 offer, but if I've had it for 5 years, I'm probably saying, yes, please. And I also know how much I'm going to end up with at the end. And that really is helpful because then I can make decisions on the fly instead of saying, oh gosh, I have to go look in my ledger and I don't know. Now, this is where the person who asked me about this said she was having problems. She is selling in a co-op mall. There are different people working behind the desk almost every day. Some of them are just typing it into the computer because it's one of those systems where you can just go look on the computer and see what you sold. But if they don't type the description in the way that you had it, and then the tag isn't returned to you, how are you going to know what you actually sold? I had that problem in a mall, and frankly, I had a fit, and I went in and said, look, I have to have my tag back. And I started putting in red ink, please return tag to the vendor. And then they started making sure I got my tags because I could not make hide nor hair, and I sell things for other people too. And I ended up having to pay a consignor for something that I was sure was theirs that I think sold at a discount, and there was no tag to go with it. And that gets into some dicey territory. So if you're having those sorts of problems, you may need to talk to a manager. You may need to talk to the other people who are working there. You may need to put a sign up at the register that says, please make sure vendors get all tags returned to them. And if you want the customer to have that information, Joanne's idea about having a perforated tag where you get half of it and the customer gets to keep half is a great idea. So, as a seller, how can the buyer know we aren't massively overpaying? I think, honestly, I hate the notion of buyer beware. I really do. But I do think if you're looking at something that's expensive, I think it really does pay to do some due diligence. Go to eBay completed sales quickly and look up and get a sense for what things are selling for there. Bearing in mind that buying on eBay should be at a little bit of a discount because you don't get to see it and handle it in person and make sure the condition is what you want and make sure it's authentic and genuine. And also because eBay, a certain amount, if an item's worth $100 but you have to ship it and it's going to cost $25 to ship, well, you're probably getting $75 on eBay plus shipping. And as a buyer, I add the shipping costs in and say, okay, so I'm paying $100. That would be a fair price in a store because it really is. That's what you're actually paying for it. You're not paying $75. So saying, well, it's less on eBay, well, that's not necessarily true if it doesn't get to you. So that's how I look at that. And so that's the best thing I can suggest as far as how the buyer can know if they're not massively overpaying is to do a little bit of due diligence. You can oftentimes at stores, you can have something put aside and held for you. A lot of stores have a 24-hour hold that they'll let you do on things, so you can do your research if you're not sure. That's another thing that you can do. Don't feel bullied into buying something. Well, you've got to buy it now because we can't do anything. Well, then it'll just have to sit there until I feel confident in it, and then I'll come back if I want it badly enough. So that honestly is the best suggestion I can give to you as far as that goes. And yeah, I think transparency is important in this business. You know, dealers have to make a profit in order to continue to supply these things, pay for the venue, help them keep their lights on, help pay for their staff. There are a lot of expenses, but sometimes people are just, I see all the time on eBay where people have something listed at some giant amount, and then you go to completed sales and 20 of them have sold for half that amount. And you just think, what do they think they're doing? Do they think that there's somebody out there who can't figure out that there's other options on the same platform? I don't get it, but I see it a lot. So anyway, that's the thing on tags. And then the other thing that somebody was asking that, oh, that was very smart. Yes, because Nate sells jewelry, and jewelry, especially compared to coins, that's an easy way to size. And that was very smart of them to send you some American coinage so that it all lines up for you. So the other thing is that the other person was saying, speaking of co-ops, I'm selling in a co-op and we're having some issues. And I guess what that gets to for me is I just shopped at a co-op yesterday, and in the middle of my shopping, the staff changed. The person who was there left, and a new person was there, and it was like starting all over from scratch. However, the person who took over was pretty well versed and knew who to ask about things, because there was an item that was unpriced that we were trying to get a price on, and she had to start over. The other person I had asked, and they had called, and the message hadn't come back in, and then they left. So I was like, whatever happened? Oh, I don't know. So we had to start from zero. A little frustrating, but they were on it, and that person was able to find where the tax forms were, so I could fill out my tax form for resale and all of that. The big problem wasn't with this co-op, it was with co-ops in general. Real quickly, I'm going to answer your off-topic question first before I get into this. Do I have a staff that helps keep up with all you do to keep us connected? Oh, that's very nice. Honestly, here's the right answer. There has to be a balance, a lot to balance. I get a lot of help from a lot of people. I don't have a staff per se, other than Zeno really helps me a lot with the tech and with the traffic and keeping track of videos, keeping video footage, making sure things get listed and put on at the right time with the right introduction, making sure you folks get notifications about this chat, for example. That's all him. So I am very grateful for that. But I get a lot of help from everybody. I did a show next to Willie Joe and Beth Kemper and the Wrinkles, and it was really fun and really great, and they helped me out a lot, especially at the end when my tent almost blew over because there was a sudden windstorm and they all got soaked trying to help me keep it down. I felt bad about that, but you know, thank goodness for friends and small favors. And so there's lots of people who help keep this going. But as far as staff, no, it's pretty much, you know, I've always been, I have partners that I pool with to do estate sales or shows or share a booth with, and they help in various ways. My friend who helps me with eBay, people say, oh, you have so many sports cards and books. Well, those are mostly him, because in exchange for doing all of my eBay stuff and helping me with the shipping and the trafficking of all of that, I let him list on my site as well. And so, you know, I do get a lot of help, but I don't have a staff per se. I just have people who are interested and fun to work with and willing to do certain things with me. And so we just participate together that way. And I do feel this is true. Good, honest people attract good, honest people. And I try to be very honest because I need the help. Miss Wildlife, hello there. And yes, here is a good point about shipping. Yeah. Oh boy. Wow. I hope those got there intact. That is such a terrible thing. I have found that I cannot ship certain things online no matter how good the box is. If it's really heavy and dense and large, I've tried UPS, I've tried the post office, they will find a way to break it. If it's really heavy, if it's made of stone, if it has a stone base, I've had them destroy wonderful things because they literally throw them in the truck and the thing starts to destroy its packaging from inside because it's so dense, and the next thing you know, you have a hole in the side of the box and the thing is coming out and rubbing on the ground and pieces are getting broken off. So I have just learned there are certain things I just won't sell online. In the mall I'm in, I hear a lot of vendors complaining about lack of sales. My sales have been steady and strong. That is wonderful. I would say how to respond nicely. It depends how involved you want to get with that. What I usually do is I kind of judge where they're coming from. If it's just sort of a, gee, I like to complain and, oh, I'm just grousing, especially if it's someone I know who doesn't really work their space, they don't really move things around, they don't ever change their prices, they turn their space into a death pile or a storage unit, then I figure, well, they're not really serious about this, and I'm just going to say, oh, gee, that's too bad. I've been doing okay. And that's about all I say. On the other hand, if it's somebody who seems really earnest and really interested and they're not doing well, then I might share, oh gosh, well, I've been doing well with such and such, or I redid my booth and I noticed that that really helped, or my sales have been good and it seems like this category has done well for me. So if you feel like there's somebody who's receptive to help and you want to help, then sharing your experience that's going well is the way that I would approach it. But I think you really have to judge where it's coming from, because some people, to be blunt, just want to bitch and just let them blow off steam and go on their way, because you're not going to be able to do anything for them anyway. So, and yes, have to bite my tongue a lot. Yes, I have found that too. For years, I would hear from the older dealers, the young people just don't want this merchandise. They are just not interested in this stuff anymore. And my friend and I think the best one, we were at Mount Dora and we're listening to these people say to each other, not to us, we're shopping at the front of the booth. And while they're complaining about the young people not being interested anymore, I watched a young couple in their 30s go through, pick stuff up. They're talking to each other. They're kind of holding it up, looking confused. Those dealers were so busy complaining to each other, they never turned around and greeted those people. They never asked them if they needed help. They never offered themselves. And the young people eventually put the stuff down and left. And I thought, you are the problem. It's not young people that are the problem. You are the problem, because you expect everything to be easy in the way you were used to, and markets change and you have to move with it, and it is real work. So there you go. Here is the, oh good, I'm glad that was well packed. I tried really hard, and yes, I do think, hopefully, did you have damage? I hope, oh, if the box had been torn more, they would have all been broken. Oh my gosh, that was pretty lucky. I have to admit, early on in YouTube, when I didn't have a room full of boxes and supplies, I sent something that was probably not packed well enough, and it got there intact, but boy, the people wrote back and they let me have it. And you know what? I said, you are right. I am sorry. I will do a better job next time. And I have, because you have to take that seriously. Anyway, so co-op we were talking about, and the person, this all sort of started, and I'm going to share a little bit about, Hedren is here with us in the, this is exactly true. That's why tagging is important. That's why service is important. Hedren was saying that one of the places she's in is a co-op, and that they don't help the customers and the management is not on it. And if you're in a place like that, my suggestion is to leave, honestly. When I look for a place to sell, on some cases, I've sent in a friend as a secret shopper and said, I want you to go in and tell me, did they say hello to you? Did they look up from the desk or their device or their computer? Was there someone on the floor offering to help if you saw something, or someone walking around the floor, or were they all at the desk hanging out and not doing anything? Because especially in a co-op situation where you're not paying your employees, you're making dealers work, there can be temptation for the dealers working to only hang out in their space, stock their space, or only hang out at the desk and play on their phone and look at their eBay, and they're not out there selling your stuff. And you need someone who is actively interested in selling your stuff too, not just theirs. And the malls I've worked at, I always tried to be very careful to make sure that even if I was working on my own project, I got up and walked around. I made sure that people knew that we were there to help them wherever they were. You've got to have that, because unless you have that, then you have to be there all the time, and you might as well have your own shop. So that's probably a good idea. This is exactly right. Ask them if there's something they're looking for. If you don't have one, take them to a place that does, because then they will come back to your store. Absolutely. And I imagine in healthcare, that's especially definitely important as well. What is the real experience customers are having? So as far as the co-op thing, you know, those are real issues, and it is a real business, and you have to look at it that way. The other thing Hedren was telling me, and I'm very proud of her, that she has managed to, I hope I'm not oversharing here, but I think this is helpful for everybody. She said that she had 2 storage lockers and her garage and mall spaces, and that she was getting merchandise really inexpensively because there's some sort of a place where you basically just leave things if you don't want them and the public can come and get them. And she said people were leaving, she's in a part of the country where there's a lot of old things, and she said people were leaving decent stuff all the time that I knew I could sell, but it was so much that suddenly I'm paying storage for it and I've got way too much. And I thought, well, this is great because you don't have a lot into it, so you can send it off, sell it for whatever, and come out ahead and get rid of that storage locker. And that's exactly what is happening, which makes me very happy. So this is the issue you're having, is that the management doesn't treat you well. Yeah, the management need to understand that you're working for them and they're not having to pay staff, because that is a real, when I ran an antique mall, labor was about 30% of our expense. And people got served and they got help that they needed. So if you're doing that and they're not appreciating that, again, that may be a clue that it's time to go elsewhere, where either you're not required to come in under those circumstances and they have professional paid staff, or where you're at least having a good time. The only thing I can say is that if they're doing that to a lot of you who are working there, maybe you ought to get together and say, hey, we need to have a dealer meeting, and then you confront them. I had a situation when I came back and was managing antique malls, and one of them in my during my absence, I was gone for over a year, they had hired a new manager and some people, and they were not really doing a very good job. And we had our first dealer meeting, and the dealers confronted me about it. And I said, okay, I will check this out. And we sent in a secret shopper, and sure enough, they were not lying. And we had to make wholesale changes there. And it was really awful and awkward. But that's what you do if you want to save your business. So those are the choices, walk the walk or walk out. Anyway, so yes, let's see. Real quickly, I guess the main thing I would say about all of these things and the things that I was asked about is that, how many of you have a death pile? Raise your hand. It's a cute name. It's a really ugly situation. Death pile is a cute name saying, oh yeah, I'm going to have this until I'm dead. That's not a really great commentary on what could happen. That means that merchandise is dead. That means that either it's not important to me and I'm never going to deal with it, it's low quality, it's the stuff that was left over, or it means I'm postponing a bunch of decisions. Maybe I need to get into another store where I'm selling that stuff instead of having it in a pile. Maybe I need to donate that stuff. Maybe I need to give up on the idea that I'm going to fix that someday and send it off to someplace where somebody else can fix that someday. Sometimes it is better to take your losses. I was talking to somebody who runs storage units the other day, and she said 95% of the people who put stuff in storage units rent them between 6 months and 6 years and are never seen after the original move-in, which means they are paying for the stuff in that storage unit over and over and over again. It's almost never worth the amount of money that they pay into holding on to it. And it's because it's postponed decisions and I can forget all about it. And that is the real danger. Very good. Well, there you go. Exactly. This is the answer. I agree, and I believe Corey has the unfortunate but right answer too, which is that they're already telling you the way it's going to be. So get out. That's great. You will make money somewhere else where they treat people better, and that will definitely be a wake-up call for them at some point. And thank you. I'm glad this has been informative, and I hope it's been fun. I really enjoy this sort of thing. And all I can say is, again, it's a wonderful thing to do. I love antiques and vintage. I really enjoy all of you so much. And I do have to say, though, for those of you who are resellers, just remember it is a real business. If you aren't looking at your tags and you don't know how much you sold and you don't know how much it cost you and you don't know how much you paid in rent and commissions, how do you know if you should keep doing what you're doing or change it to something else? Um, you really have to, I every time I get an eBay statement, I do my books. Every time I have a live sale on YouTube, I do my books. Every time I get a mall report and a check, I do my books. Because this is supposed to be fun, even if you're just doing it for a hobby, even if you're doing it because you want a write-off. I know some people who want to lose money in this a little bit because they don't need to make money at this, and that's fine too. But just know where you are, and that is, because otherwise you can just end up throwing a lot down a hole and taking the enjoyment out of it. And this is a fun, joyous thing, so let's keep it fun and joyous. um, it applies to just life, exactly. And I appreciate hearing from all of you who are collectors as well, because you collectors are the reason that we're here. And so doing things better and doing things right for your benefit and making sure we're giving you what you need is what we're here for. So thank you very much for all of the participation. And thank you all so much in general. I just oh yes, yeah, this is the thing. That's the other thing too, is can you afford the rent? It depends on what you're selling. Sydney, I'm sure, is very expensive. Major cities are. I sell in Seattle. It's the most expensive mall space I have, but it consistently does well enough to justify it. On the other hand, I used to have a space in Seattle and she wasn't making enough money. And so she got some bean counters in and they said, oh, well, at your current sales rate, you need to be getting 20% commission instead of 14. So she raised the commission to 20% and everybody moved out because we didn't make any money at 20% commission. There wasn't any thought as to how do I raise sales. It was just how do I get you to pay my bills. So again, it is a business. You've got to treat it like one if you're on the reseller side. And I really feel the same way. I really enjoy doing this every month. Next month will probably be earlier in the month. We usually don't wait till the third week, but my travels and getting the van replacement took me away. So thank you for being patient. I agree. I feel like this is a really wonderful group of people. I'm very thankful for everything that you do on my behalf, and I will try to continue to do the same for you. If there's any other questions or comments or things you'd like to talk about now, I am open to it. And otherwise, think of what you'd like to talk about in the new year, because there will be big changes in the new year, no doubt. That's just the way New Year's are. And we'll talk about some of them and what that might mean for us as collectors and as resellers both. So, yes, I would love to get out to California. I had a wonderful time crossing the border and going into San Diego, and it made me realize that Southern California is pretty accessible from there. So I'm hoping that I will get to do more things in California. It's the first time I've ever videoed in California. I can't believe such a huge state with so many amazing things, and I finally got there. But we have a long way. We have a long way to go. There are many people and many places here that I definitely would like to see. I still haven't been able to do much in Wisconsin. I haven't gotten to New Zealand yet. Many of you are on my list to visit and meet in person. In the meantime, I will be in Florida in February this year. I will not be there in January. And so I will hope to see some of you folks in the real world then, but we will see each other here in the meantime. And Connecticut, yes, absolutely. My aunt is 90 and I would like to see her. And she works at a wonderful thrift store, so Connecticut is on the list too. North Carolina, yes, I have. I would love to set up a couple of appraisal fairs. I have some folks in South Carolina who want one as well, so we'll definitely be talking. The new year is coming soon, and we'll start scheduling some things. And Yes, I am glad I got a new to me van too, even though I love Leroy, but I have basically the same thing except a lower mile version of same. So anyhow, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. And if you have any other comments, feel free to leave them. I will hit the outro here, but it's about 4 minutes long, so I'll be able to converse with you more in the chat, the comments. And Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, uh, Killer Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. And then we'll see you in the new year.